Andrew Farriss, welcome back to Australian Musician.
G'day, Greg. How are you, mate?
I'm not too bad. So where have you been spending this lockdown year and how have you been coping?
Yeah, well, I've been okay, thanks. I appreciate you asking. And I was a bit more worried about some other members of my family, but I don't live in the city or the suburbs anymore. I've owned a cattle and grains when it rains property for many years out in the bush, and I made a decision some time ago before the drought and the bushfires and now the pandemic to go live there. And so it's been a hat trick out there, but the isolation factor, at least when I've been at the farm, is I feel very fortunate because at least I'm able to go outdoors and do things and not have to wear a mask, you know. But however, I'm calling you at the moment from down in Sydney, as my wife Marlene has come down for her 6-month cancer checkups at the hospital. Yeah, and you know, going to the hospital is, of course, the last place in the world you want to go right now. But we had to go there, and you know, it really hit home to me how much our healthcare workers have been through and are going through. You know, unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, I wish you well with all of that. When we last spoke, was late 2019. You were talking to me about an album that was coming out in early 2020. We're now talking about an EP coming out on October 2nd. What was the rationale behind the release change?
Yeah, like the whole idea was create as much confusion as possible, I think. No, seriously, it actually has been so far so good. Thanks, Greg. What's going on is, you're right. I started to release my LP, which is self-titled, as Andrew Farriss, because I've got no imagination. I couldn't think of any other name, you know. But seriously, what happened next was the pandemic hit, of course, and everyone's plans got thrown up in the air like confetti, you know, for a lot of people. Anyway, and including mine with my LP, and the record label very wisely sort of said to me, look, Andrew, you can continue releasing your music off your LP, but everyone's gone home, you know, to self-isolated. And that was internationally, not just in Australia, you know. And I thought about it for a minute. I thought, well, yeah, hang on a minute, this is tricky. Do I stop? Do I keep going? What am I doing? You know? And then so I took their advice and I just stopped pushing, promoting, releasing, whatever, and started working out on the farm. I must have planted like 200 or 400 trees or something, did all this other stuff. And, you know, tidied up things as well. I think some of us have done, fix doors and paint things and do whatever I was doing in the isolation period, and spend time with people who are close to me, you know, and try to, you know, do what's right for them. Anyway, amongst all that, I started to think more about it, and I thought, well, okay, I do have these other songs, which I haven't released to anybody, or I've written them and they're recorded. I'm happy with the recordings. I'm comfortable with them, but they didn't suit the LP, you see. And so I thought, well, I said to the record label, look, I've got these tracks, you know, and songs. Do you like these recordings? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, what about I put them out? And I'm thinking they say, no, what are you talking about? That's silly, you know, like you were doing an LP, you know. But to my surprise, they said, what a great idea. I'm like, really? Anyway, so, okay. So here we are. And the 5-track EP comes out on October the 2nd. And the bit about the EP, to me, that I feel makes most sense of all, is that the songs are really about the earth, all the songs, and about humanity. That's what all 5 songs are about. And I figured, well, I couldn't think of 5 tracks that would be better time to put out right now. That's all.
Yeah. As you said, 5 tracks. The EP is called Love Makes the World. Love Makes the World is the only song on the album that you haven't collaborated with somebody. Tell me about that track. How did that come together? Was it an acoustic guitar thing?
Let me think about that. Yes, it was actually. For me, that was the acoustic guitar song that started out, and it was pretty much just a simple song about the cycle of life. None of us would be here as little babies in the world if two people hadn't got together and decided they liked each other, so in some capacity. And there's a cycle of life, and then, as my dad said, everyone gets their turn. Then it's when the child grows up and they're mature and they fall in love or whatever they're going to do, and then they have kids, and on it goes. So that's really what the song's about.
Tears in the Rain is a track that you had been performing with a latter-day version of INXS. So it was a song that you've been workshopping for some time?
Okay. That's true, actually. INXS was sort of very end of our touring. We were messing around with it in a different way, but we never really tracked it. We played it live a bit, and but the actual beginnings of the song, a long time before that, I actually wrote the chorus and the melody of the chorus and the chords and most of the arrangement many years ago, and it just been sitting around. And back, I don't know, somewhere around about 2011 or somewhere around there, 2000, something like that, 2011, Ciaran Gribbin I played him what I had, and this is, I don't think INXS even knew it existed, and I played it to Ciaran, and I said, I've never been able to sort of get comfortable with the verse. I know what the chorus is, and I just can't think of something, that's meaningful enough to put it in the verse. And so Ciaran, or Gribbo as I call him, he sat there and he listened to it and he went, oh, and we'd been just recently, we'd met up and heard this story about these two brothers, William and Daniel Clark. And Daniel Clark has cerebral palsy, and the two boys took a trip up the jungles in Borneo with their dad to try and rescue the orangutans in Borneo. And they were kids, really, back then when they did that. And extraordinary courage, really. And here we are, 10 years on, would you believe? They raised over $900,000.
Wow.
And they've secured 140,000 acres of endangered wildlife refuge for these animals, And so that's really what that song Tears in the Rain is all about. And the reason it ties into my EP is because, as I said before, all 5 tracks on the song relate to humanity and how we relate to the earth. So the song in that sense is a sort of environmental song. But I tip my hat, to the brothers, the boys that were brave enough to go and do that.
Yeah. The track My Brother, I gather that's one that's close to your heart?
Absolutely. My brother, speaking sort of generally, I think most people, when they hear the song and they know my background and whatever, they'll assume that the song is all about Michael Hutchence. But it's not that simple. I co-wrote the song with John Stevens, and you'd probably need to talk to John about that personally, but it's about someone in his family that he lost, a male figure. And men in general are not very good at talking about loss. We're just not good at it, we like talking about sports and, cars and pragmatic, how do you fix the tap outside that's leaking and this sort of stuff. But we're not very good when it comes to discussing more sort of, intimate personal things that hurt. Women are actually great at that stuff, but blokes don't know. Anyway, look, so the thing is, the song is a little bit more open than it first would have seemed. In other words, the song is really about, about loss and loss of a male figure in your life is really what the song is broadly about. Yeah.
All the Stars Are Mine is the current single, collaboration with Suze DeMarchi. What did Suze contribute to that track?
A lot. How that was born was, I've always been a fan of Suze's, and strangely enough, we both come from Perth. We probably lived in suburbs close to each other when we were kids, and we never knew each other, growing up when we did. So there's sort of a bizarre connection right there, but let alone that she's an awesomely talented songwriter, performer, her band, Baby Animals, amazing band. But how that happened was we first wrote a song together called Where Do You Sleep Tonight, which will be coming out on my LP, which will be coming out in March of 2021. And I also tracked that and wrote it. But the thing is that with All the Stars Are Mine, I, at one point in my life, lived in the UK, both in London and out in the country. And 2 of my 3 children were born overseas in the UK. And as a foreign national, having had children born in a foreign country, I know what that felt like. You start to put down roots, so your children start to go to school in a foreign country, and you start to appreciate that it's different when you just look at life from within your own country and you judge or you assume that you understand what other people are doing in other countries. But it's not till you actually go and you have a real life immersion in something. And I don't mean as a tourist, I mean you actually involve yourself in the culture and in the communities wherever you are, that you really get a feeling for it. Well, Suze DeMarchi had actually done the same sort of thing, but over in the United States, and she was living in Los Angeles, and she'd had kids there. And so when we started to write together, we were talking about this song and the idea of it or whatever. And that's how it was born, was the idea of looking at the view that it's not you live in a foreign country, it's I live in a foreign country.
First Man on Earth is the final track on the EP and my favorite song. It's a track that you can really get lost in at just over 8 minutes. What's going on there instrumentally?
It's amazing how many people have asked about First Man on Earth. Okay, where do I begin with this one? It's too long, and I apologize. Okay, it's 8 minutes and 8 seconds long. Exactly, 8:08. Okay, now the song is actually about we as human beings, as biological entities. We look at you and I now, we're talking on this technology, right? Now, this technology 30 years ago, we couldn't have done this, right? Or maybe the military could have, but we can't, right? Back then. Right? Or if you did, you would have had to have a television studio that you owned or something. Anyway, but in 30 years' time, there will be some other technology, right? In 100 years' time, some other technology. But in the meantime, we continue on as these biological people that just go on and on and on, right? I hope, you know. But the song First Man on Earth really poses the question, am I the first man on earth to really feel like this? That, you know, where is this going exactly? You know, because there is no, I don't see anyone with a roadmap or a set of instructions with where we're heading with all of this technology stuff, or even indeed why we even need some of it, you know. And I'll relate to one of the other songs on the EP, which is My Brother. You know, I sometimes wonder, especially with younger people with these sorts of technologies, and they don't understand that they're really also partly developed really by corporations to make money, not necessarily whether they're necessarily great for us as humans, or you know, with perhaps some of the advancements in technology with medicine and other things that are absolutely brilliant, or bring people closer together during the pandemic, that we can talk to loved ones and friends and people we're missing and feel like we're communicating. That's all great, but there's other elements to technology that are potentially quite spooky, you know, and I don't know that anyone really has the answers for it all. you know, and so that's really, I'm being verbose, but that's really what the song's all about. Yeah.
And how did it build instrumentally? What I
Yeah,
believe
sorry. Yeah, that was the question. Yeah.
You started off fiddling with the synth.
Yeah, well, sort of. Yep. How that happened was, sorry, I didn't answer that question very well. Instrumentally, how First Man on Earth came about was because I was working with Guy Chambers in London, and somewhere in Primrose Hill in a studio, and Guy had had a commitment, a family commitment that morning. And I walked into the studio and there was just this plethora of awesome old analog synthesizers. Like I'm saying, the walls behind me, in front of me, and there was just this beautiful range of old analog synths that all worked properly, you know, didn't have any issues or anything, you know. And I just went, I was like a kid in a candy store. I just looked at it and I went, this is just awesome, right? And so I basically, while Guy was busy off somewhere else, I asked the engineer just to roll the recording, and I put down all of that backing and stuff that you can hear when I was in the studio in London. And then Guy came back and he goes, what's going on? And I said, well, I've just tracked this. And he goes, what is this? And I go, well, this is what I was doing. You know, he probably thought I was going to just have a simple little pop song, you know, that we worked on a funk, you know, a simple little chorus with, you know, I love you, baby, I love you, true blue, and all that sort of stuff. And I said, no, I've been doing this, you know. So he said, I love it, let's do it. So, and we talked about the idea of the first man on earth. You know, about, am I the first guy to ever feel this way? You know, am I the first man to have experienced these emotions or thoughts? You know, it's not necessarily about a Neanderthal with a club in a cave. That's not quite what it's all about. It's a slightly different, although it could be, I suppose, if the Neanderthal had an iPhone, it would be relevant. But, you know, yeah, so that's kind of what the song has its beginnings were. But Guy also played some guitar on it, and he cut the original guide vocal on it. And then I used that as the basis after we'd finished the lyric together. And then I recut my own vocal more recently and added some slide guitar and some congas and other bits and pieces to the recording and juiced it up a little bit, let's put it that way. Someone asked me the other day, am I interested in engineering? And I thought at first they were talking about, you know, audio engineering. But I got the context and I said, are you talking about like bridges and stuff, right? And they said, yeah. And I said, that's funny, you should mention that. I'm interested in construction. I find architecture really interesting. I find bridges fascinating. I find, you know, all these sorts of things, including technology and why we were able to talk to each other right now and all this stuff's all very interesting. Yeah, all of it. It's fascinating. And so when I first started off as a little kid playing piano, one of the things I used to do, much to my mother and my uncle's horror, was I used to try to pull the piano apart, you know, because I wanted to know how it worked, you know, not just how to play it, but I used to pull the little, you know, like the front off and the bottom, and I wanted to see where the pedal thing went up and why the hammer hit the string. You know, I was absolutely fascinated with that part of it. And that's part of my journey as a songwriter, is I tend to be like that. And yet in this EP era that I'm talking to you in, I'm really featuring myself on the acoustic guitar, just playing acoustic guitar, old school instruments. Even though I you know, and because it is actually an engineering masterpiece, the acoustic guitar. It's portable, it sounds good, it looks good, and there's some beautiful acoustic guitars available now with some excellent, you know, electronics in them. You know, so it's really, that is a genius instrument, that one, and even in this era, it's still got legs, you know.
So what was the main acoustic guitar you used on the EP?
That's a good question. I'm fortunate enough to have 2 or 3 acoustic guitars, maybe 4 actually, that I really love. On this particular set of recordings, one of the acoustic guitars I used is a Southern Jumbo. It's a J45 from about 1947. That's probably my favorite of all my acoustic guitars. I treat it with kit gloves. It never goes out on the road. It just gets pulled out from recordings. It just sounds awesome. And then there's the Little Maiden. I think it's an 808. I think is actually the name of it, which is weird. Anyway, but yeah, I think that's the model number. It's the like Tommy Emmanuel's one that he uses. Is that one like that? Yeah. Okay, great little guitar, and that's the one I like playing as well. And you know, I'm carrying too much weight, and so it sits nice and thin on my tummy. You know, but also other acoustic guitars. I've got an Alhambra. It's really hard to explain what this guitar is. It's an Alhambra. It looks like a Dobro, but it's from about the mid-1930s, and you can play it like a normal acoustic guitar. It's very rare, I found out, since I bought that when I lived in London. And then the other one that I've got that I really love playing is actually my wife's acoustic guitar that I bought for her as a present. It's a copy of an Epiphone, and it looks a bit like the J160 that John Lennon used to play. The Gibson J160 is just basically a dreadnought with an old-fashioned pickup from the 1970s in it, but it sounds awesome, basically. You know, it's not fancy or expensive or anything. It just sounds great.
Yeah. So the EP is out on October 2nd. You're saying the album March next year?
Yes, March 2021. But the EP comes out on October the 2nd.
Yeah. And you hope to tour the album, obviously, next year?
Mate, I'd love to get out on tour. I really, you know, again, my heart goes out, not just to health workers, but all the other musicians and people who support musicians and road crews and all the production companies and promoters and everybody that tries to make a buck out of the music industry. I mean, the whole phrase social distancing is a nightmare, because the whole idea of entertainment is to have as little social distancing as possible. Yeah. You know, it's a contradiction, you know, for anyone that's involved in music or wants to go play live. It's a contradiction in terms, you know. It's a disaster. So yeah, I'd love to get out on tour, and you know, I just hope the powers that be and those people in their infinite wisdom who seem to know what's going on can recognize that and support that. You know, that there are certain industries that are perhaps hit a bit harder than other industries, and hopefully they'll understand that and try to support the industries and won't try to be clever. Just try to help. You know, yeah.
All right, Andrew Farriss, all the best with the album and life in general, and thanks for joining us.
Stay well, Greg. Take care, mate. Okay.